All right. Let's get started. How many people here are runners? Raise your hand. Good. That's all right. Just define running. How many people here are walkers? I'm going to start out with a little story. Guy's out of a job for a long time. He really needs a job, so he looks through the want ads and he finds this. The local zoo has a position open, so he goes in and he meets with the director of employment. And he says, "So, what's the position?" The guy says, "Well, we have a very popular gorilla exhibit, but our gorilla passed away, and it's about $200,000 to go to Africa and get a new one. We don't have it in the budget." He says, "That's tragic. How does this involve me?" He says, "Well, you see that gorilla suit over in the corner?" He goes, "You've got to be kidding me." He goes, "It's very lifelike. Nobody would know. Pays really well. Just got to get up, move around in it each day. Nobody will know the difference when you're standing over by the bars." So he says, "Boy, this is terrible. This is really what my life has come to." But he really needs the job, so he takes it. First day he's in there feeling sorry for himself, thinking this is what my life has come to. And he's in the corner and he's just moping around. And this little girl comes up to the bars and she looks at him and she gets very excited. There's a gorilla there. So the little girl starts to get very animated. She makes more and more noise. And as she does, her parents hear this commotion going on. And her parents come in, "Oh, look, the gorilla's up." So he figures, I might as well give a show, right? So he gets up and he starts to move around. And they get more excited. And as they get more excited, more people hear the noise. More people start coming over. And as they do, he starts to feed off their energy. So he starts doing different things. Starts strutting around. Starts banging his chest. More people come. Starts grunting. More people come. So now the place is filled in front of the bars. He gets really cocky. He sees this rope overhead. And he grabs up and he starts swinging. Fake gorilla swinging out. Swinging out. And he gets so cocky and the people are going so nuts that he loses his grip just as he's passing over the adjoining fence. And he falls down square in the middle of the lion's den. And the lion turns and looks at him, and he can't say anything. He's got all these people watching. And then the lion takes one step toward him and takes another. Finally, the guy can't hold off anymore, and he yells, "Help!" At which point the lion lowers his head and says, "Will you shut up? You want to get us all fired?" The idea being that we all consider runners or faster walkers to not be us. They're the people on the other side of that cage. We're the fakers, right? They're the real deal. They're the real animals. But it is a technique that you can learn. So the first thing I'm going to caution you on is patience. Most athletes I know, most Americans I know, are microwave. I want it now and I want it quick, and then if I don't get it now, it's because either I'm a failure or because I'm not trying hard enough. In these things, you're trying to link up your body and your mind. And obviously you all came here, now that we're all in our late 20s, right? We've obviously have some systems in our life that have not been so healthy for us. And so one of the things you need is you've got to have patience to develop these things. You've got to have feel. I'm always counseling my athletes. I've been coaching for about 30 years. That you can't fake feel. You can go just through the motions, but until you start to understand it, you guys know this with everything in your life, until you can really internalize that and feel it, number one, it's not that enjoyable. You know, there's that saying, fake it till you make it. That's good when you're starting out. Do the techniques, but keep looking for feel to see if you're doing it right, because that's where your pleasure is going to come from. How many people here run or walk alone? Like to do it solitary? Good. So you're not really, your intrinsic thing isn't here that you're waiting that once you do this well that somebody's going to jump out from the bushes and go, "Congratulations, you did a great job." That's what you really wanted all along was attention, right? Not at all. You know that it's very nice that if you're out there and you're just working out on your own, to have that pleasure of doing something right. And this is one of the arguments I have with all the people I work with. You are all athletes. They're not those people on the other side of the fence. Because you know what? If I'm out there and I'm running, and I might be slightly faster than the average bear, I'm visualizing some Olympian that I really admire who I look like I'm standing still compared to them. But I can pretend I'm them when I'm out there. And I can try and mimic what I do and see them doing and what good form looks like. When you get fatigued in any type of exercise you're going to do, what's going to be one of the first things that happens to your body? You're going to lose your form. You watching the skating finals are coming up, will be coming up in Sochi. Just watch those guys. Watch from the first minute they get on the ice to the last minute they're on the ice. Oh, come on already. So where's that last triple I got to do? You know, and pretty much I'll tell you right now, when it comes down to fatigue and those things, the person who doesn't fall down wins the medal. Because most people are falling down. So our bodies are going to want to revert to what's the most comfortable form. We all know it. How many people here consider themselves to be world champion slouchers? I am. Don't put me on a soft couch on an afternoon when I need a nap, because I have no body tone at all. I just become one of the pillows. So this same thing happens, obviously, when you do anything that's physical. So one of the things I want you to understand is a lot of what you probably heard about running in particular, and it also applies to walking, is probably wrong. How many people in the early running days heard people yell out to them, raise your knees, lift your knees, get your knees up there high? How about lengthen your stride? Who's ever had somebody yell that? Make your stride longer. There's two forms, and I want to say this. I think that we all want to be fleeter. I think that we all want to be faster. I think that if we say it out loud, then you think you're committed to that. There's no minimum speed limit. If you want to be better and more efficient, that's a good thing. Okay? Don't think that you've got to be the best, or don't, for Lord's sake, don't look at the person next to you who's doing it and start comparing yourself, because that'll ruin things in a hurry. You could be doing just great, and you make that comparison, and suddenly you end up lacking. So again, going back to feel, when I talk about speed, don't think like, oh my God, he's going to sign us up for the Olympics. Brendan's talking speed again. Okay? I'm talking about just getting better and more efficient at what you do. How about using less energy to do what you normally do? Would that be in your interests? Yeah. So what we're going to do is we're trying to retrain muscles here. So this may be the hard part for you. And when I talk about Americans, we all have lottery thinking. How many people, and boy, now that they have those electronic billboards up, how many people here are at least more tempted to go out and buy a lottery ticket when the mega jackpot's up to $400 million? You're already thinking, oh, man. I mean, normally I'd think paying off bills if I'm willing to little one, but now I'm thinking like, wow, the Brendan Jackson Foundation. That's good. That appeals to me. Who am I going to be giving money to? Whereas, how many people think of buying tickets when it's only $1 million routinely? Yeah, because seriously, what are we going to do with $1 million? It's not even worth my effort. I'm not walking to the mini mart for $1 million. $400 million, I'll do that. That's how our thinking is. So I want you to understand that exercise, and as you get better at this, is a skill. How many people felt they were gifted athletes in high school and constantly got that feedback? Yeah, didn't happen, right? Slow poke, come on, you're holding up gym class. Those may have been the messages that you got. So you don't envision yourself that, but understand that exercise, number one, for people who do it and do it well, athletes, they put a heck of a lot of time into it. There are people who are more, there are Kenyans that were born to run much more than I was, okay? But they put a heck of a lot of time into their craft and their skill. And so what happens to what I call that lottery thinking, we want it now, we want a big payoff. Good exercise, good technique is a 401k proposition. You don't dump in $500,000 the day before you retire. Why? Because you got a whole day to accumulate interest on $500,000, which is probably still considerable, but it's not your big payoff. What do you want to do with a 401k? When do you start? If you want to be a millionaire when you retire, when do you start? When you're in your 20s. See those things a little laid out, and hopefully if you don't have a couple of market fluctuations or crooked people running your mortgage departments, you'll get a payoff. You'll get a constant payoff where you could be a millionaire if you just do that. Same thing with exercise. So if you want to be stronger, if you want to learn how to go longer, if you want to learn how to persist at this, you start small and you build. I'll give you a good example of neuromuscular stuff, because this is hard to learn. When you try to do something quicker, the first thing your brain's going to say is like, oh, that's a new skill. And the body goes, I'm really into this. I'd really love to do this. And brain goes, I'd like to do this, but really I'm going to take this at my own pace, okay? Because the thing is, I've got to get my brain linked up with my body. I'm pretty good at vocabulary, and I'm a darn good speller, but I would never, ever challenge my 23-year-old son to a texting war. Oh, I understand the concepts, but he does this all day long, and I don't. I'm going with one hand, that's comfortable, and this, oh, there's that letter, it's over here. How do we get to the numbers? So for me, it's a matter if I don't practice it enough, but if I did it more often, I'm sure I would be pretty proficient at it. Same thing with this. Now for practice, you guys got to bring practicing these skills I'm going to teach you down to your own level, meaning you don't have to have this grand time set up in your day. I'm finding this with exercise. You don't have to have this time that's set. I've got an hour. How many people here are just blissful where they can go, oh yeah, the world revolves around me for that hour. People stop calling me. I have sufficient warm-up time. I have a wonderful work-up time. And then I have this wonderful cool-down time, and the world never intrudes. That doesn't happen. How many people feel here that sometimes their exercise is a stressor? Trying to get it in is a stressor. Yeah. What are we really trying to have it do for us? de-stress us. So I also have this rule, I never try to let my exercise be an additional stress on me. And so you've got to, I will often say to my athletes, if it's something that they think is more difficult to do, and I'm the triathlon coach, so swimming is a huge, huge deal for a lot of people, getting comfortable in the water. I'll say to my coaches, so our approach is, what would it take to enter you into this conversation? Lower the barriers. Lower your expectations in some way. I don't mean that you're just slumming it, but I mean lower your expectations so that it's not something fearful. It's not something you fear. Because that's not a good reinforcement. If you think this is going to be a stressor, then you're probably not going to go out and do it. Let me get to the actual technique part. So we talked about some of the things that might be wrong. Lifting your knees high. Your knees should be about as high as they normally go unless you're training for the Olympics. What's the problem with lengthening your stride? You've heard that, right? What's the problem with lengthening your stride? You're taking, well, you won't. You'll probably take less unless you're really proficient. Unless you're, a high athlete, a highly tuned athlete, where you get to that level where they can do high turnover and stride. Stride is a form of power, I should say, as a result of basically power and acceleration. Which means most people, when they imagine lengthening their strides, are doing something that's artificial to the way they're running. That they're naturally just trying to cover more ground. And I'll tell you why that's a big detriment. Speed can be attained two ways. And again, we're talking speed, we're talking about being more efficient using less energy, basically. The formula for speed is stride length, so I'm going to bring that back in now that I told you to ignore it, times cadence. How many times you're doing it. And I'll tell you this, for everybody in this room, myself included, the key thing is to increase your cadence and just let the stride be what it's going to be. But especially not to artificially do that stride. So when I want to go faster in a race, I don't think about taking a longer stride. I just make this intuitive move where I'm covering more grounds with each step. But I'm basically paying attention to cadence. In triathlon, cadence is a huge, huge thing. What's different about triathlon running, and a lot of my people walk too when they get up, as opposed to regular running. What's the difference? Everybody know what a triathlon is? Swim, bike, run? What's the big, huge difference? What's that? You just swam and biked. It's in order, SBR. So you have to now deal with muscles that are already fatigued. Okay? So you've got to, efficiency is where a lot of these studies came out of triathlon, because they really had to, especially when you're working with Olympic athletes, how do you get them to come close to their best performances when we already know they're going to be in deficit here? In efficiency. Efficiency is the way to do it. Okay? Now, you can go home. I want you to understand something. You can waste a lot of your energy and be real tired. We have a saying, any coach can make you tired. Is it efficient, and are you getting better? So I have a really good furnace at home. Produces great heat, but we have an 1820s house. So I think probably half that heat goes out through the walls when we're doing it. So I'm capable. We got a big engine to produce heat. How efficient is it? It's not. National Grid reminds me of that every 30 days. It's not. So again, we want you guys to be efficient. So here's what we're going to do. One of the big problems with and I'm going to exaggerate this so you can see it, but one of the big problems with stride is that many people are coming down heel first. It's a natural consequence of being fatigued, and it's a natural consequence of people who just start running who really haven't studied the sport or gotten in touch with their body. And so we'll hear this all day long. At Fleet Feet, there's a Dan DeFries. He and my colleague Dan and I have been there the longest. Dan's been in the business for about 30 years. I've been with Fleet Feet for 10. One of the things we'll listen to when people are trying out shoes is we won't even look at their feet. We'll listen to their footsteps to find out what shoe, a better shoe for them is. Because you can hear when people are slapping their feet, and you can hear when they're much lighter. And we want much lighter. If you're slapping your feet, how many people get that sensation when they're walking or they're running? That they feel that they can hear that they've got a heavy foot strike, slapping. Maybe you haven't paid attention to it. But most people will do that, and that's probably because you're landing on your heel first. Again, a consequence, probably a little bit of fatigue, but also just bad form, or especially trying to manufacture a stride. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to hit on the heel first. It's going to severely load your lower leg complex. It's going to send shock waves through your knee. You're going to lower your center of gravity as you go to cushion your stride, basically, and then you're going to have to re-accelerate your entire body mass up, at which point you come down and do the exact same thing with the other foot. So one of the things is, besides taking a lot of shock, go ahead, question? Did you have a question? Oh, I thought you were going to. So besides putting a lot of shock into your stride, basically your body having to absorb all that. You're also doing a braking action. So when you come through like this, you get momentum up, you move yourself forward, and then you hit like that, and now you produce a braking action. So you lose your momentum. You lose your speed. And I want you to think of this. You ever been to a playground? Don't pretend you haven't done this on your own when there's been nobody around, but probably with a kid or a niece or a nephew. They've got one of those manual merry-go-rounds. It's got a pole through the middle of it. Okay? And as you get speed up, what will happen is it will rotate on its axis. So let's say kid gets on, they say, let's go. Dead stop, what's the first thing you're going to do? You're going to put one leg up on the platform. What are you going to do with the other leg? If it's a dead stop, you're going to dig it hard into the ground and get it pushing, right? And you get the thing going, and it's getting some rotation on it. Now the kid says to you, go faster. Are you going to do the same motion that you did to get the thing to overcome inertia? Dig your foot hard into the ground? Think about it. Why wouldn't you? You know why. What's going to happen? If it's going fast enough, it's going to tear your leg off, which should be a disincentive. What's another reason? It's moving, so what will happen if I dig my leg into the ground? It's going to slow it down. It's going to slow it. So if you've got any brains at all, and we do because you signed up for this, you're going to come up on this toe and you're going to go, right? That's how you're going to get speed. You're going to skim that right through so that you're making ground contact. Guess what, guys? This is what running and walking should be. This motion right here. Not, right? Does that make sense to you? So the question is, how do we get, through what techniques do we use in order to get that basic movement? Now, I often hear this from runners. They talk about the push-off when they run, right? Anybody here ever done a running race? You ever seen a running T-shirt from a race? And they got that little man that's like this or one that's like that. There's the push-off. It's right there. It's right on the shirt. So do me a favor. So we all agree there's a push-off in running? Get it like that? Good. So come on up here for a moment. What's your name again? Great. Come on up. So I just said, where should your leg be ideally when you're skimming the ground? Let's say we're on that merry-go-round again. Where would your leg be? Where's the optimal position when it's touching the ground? Right underneath your hip, right? So if that's the optimal position, right underneath your hip, Greg's going to show me push-off right now. Go ahead, Greg. I'm waiting. Where's the push-off and run? See what he has to do that when I say push-off? Good. So again, but that's not the ideal for position for your leg to be in, is it? Is it? Good. So put it right underneath your hip again. Good. Push off. See, he has to go back to that position. He can't push off just doing that. Thank you very much. So the idea is basically what we've been thinking about pushing and running hard like that has obviously got to be wrong. If this is where the ideal position is, this is what we should be focusing. Not a push off, not out in front. It's getting this hip right underneath. So a real simple thing to do is you guys get up and turn sideways and just brace your fingers. You only need a few fingers on the chair next to you unless you got a really, really powerful stride. And just nice and loose. Point your toes up a little so that you don't catch them and come skim right under the ground. Just feel that skimming motion. Good. So it's coming right underneath your hip when you're hitting, right? Good. Have a seat. So Good Form Running came out of the program came out of a place called Playmakers, a wonderful running store and sporting store in East Lansing, Michigan. They hired this guy named Grant Robeson. Grant now works for New Balance Shoes, and Grant's among his distinguished, highlights in his career, you could say, is he was an Olympian in 2004 in the 1,500 meters in Athens. And the owner out there, Kurt, said to him, I've really been looking into this form thing, and I really want to teach it, and I think it's really great, and I think you would benefit from it, and I want you to be our spokesman for this, and it's a really cool thing to really make you fast. And Grant's first response naturally was, I'm an Olympian. Okay, so I'm glad this works for the people in East Lansing, but I've been to Athens, okay? And Grant said, so, he incorporated these things we're going to do, and he said, it's amazing. It's the first time in his running career that he was uninjured by incorporating. So he knew how to run. He knew how to run fast. He knew how to run at world levels, but he didn't really know how to run efficiently. And he's got a great thing on the Good Form Running site that New Balance puts out. It's a wonderful analysis. It shows the Kenyans up front. And it's surprise, surprise. And if you drew a line through their head, they just don't fluctuate. I mean, they just look like, right? And you look at the other guys in the pack, and they're bouncing up and down, and they're going side to side. Now, I understand that you get comfortable with running, and obviously they're all Olympians. but it's less efficient. It just comes down to physics. You know, you might like that rattle and squeak and the less air that you have in your tire when you drive, because you're used to driving like that. You know, all the little quirks of your car. There's no way it's more efficient. There's no way in heck it's more efficient. It's just what you've come to know is comfortable. So the first thing we want to talk about is posture. So one thing we'll typically see, one of the things that my coaches and I like to do every year is to go up to Lake Placid and watch the Ironman, and we go out on the course about a mile out and just watch form deteriorate, basically. About 95% up. And so you're thinking, when you most need the energy, your body's now doing something that's requiring more energy. You know, so one of the typical things we'll see a lot of lean from the waist as you start to get fatigued. And what this is going to do, it's going to fatigue the muscles back here. The hamstring's going to put a ton of pressure on it. It's going to make you pound more when you come down. So again, when you least want to be pounding your body, you're going to be doing the most. So one of the things you really want to do is have great posture. So stand up for me. And for posture, it's something, how many people here at parents that sit up straight, put your shoulders back? Okay. So we've been hearing that for a long time. We've not always been heeding it, but we've been hearing it for a long time. Same thing here. We want you to stand up straight. So one thing you should always do when you're walking well or running, and this is hard to do. I always feel like when I'm in stress of a race, like I'm a racehorse and I'm my head pulling to the side and I get it there, probably like, stop, pay attention, look straight ahead. Is to just look, keep your eyes focused, relaxed on top of your head, but looking straight ahead. So lots of us like to say, either admire their own feet when they're walking. They're like, yeah, so anyway, I was doing this. They're still there. They're not going anywhere. But you drop everything when you do. The hips go back, hamstrings get stressed, and you're going to get that more impact as you go up there. So one thing I like you to do right now, let's just take your hands overhead. Let's lock them out, palms up towards, and just feel gently. You can take a good stretch because it's mid-afternoon here, but then settle down. Don't use as much energy. And just feel what it's like to have your shoulders stacked over your hips and feel where your legs are underneath that. Okay? Beautiful. When you use your arms, I especially see this out of women. This is a great, great word, ipsilaterally. How many people feel this one? Either because they got a weak core or they run like this. Go down to the parkway. You don't have to do this yourself. Or if you really have a good friend you can trust that you won't be insulted by, have them watch you when you run. But go down and watch people run, and you'll see all the time. So here's another argument. So if you're doing this, where are your hips going? Yeah. It's like riding a bicycle against somewhere. They're going in a straight line, and you're going, who's going to get there first? And again, I don't want to read first as being, I want first to be more efficient, we're talking about, not necessarily that you want to race and win everything, although I'll take it if you get it. Good. So once again, let's do this. Get our hips nice and lined up underneath us. You want to get a feel for that. You guys want to get a sensitivity for that. Good. Have a seat for a moment. We'll talk a little bit about that. We constantly need to reset our posture, and we constantly need to pay attention to it, especially when we're fatiguing. Okay? So one of the things I will do when I start to fatigue is I play this game myself. How can I use less energy right now? Especially I just got off a hard bike leg. It was a brutal swim, and now we're in the running, and it's 85 degrees, and we're going uphill. So one of the things I'll do, first of all, is like, well, I know I don't want to waste energy. Check. So hands will come down to the side. I don't want that ipsilateral. I want to think about 90 degrees, coming down to the side, and I'm looking straight ahead. Why? Because that's the only way I'm going to get alignment. And I understand that when we get fatigued, we want to look around, and we don't want to pay attention to what we're doing. This is a marvelous thing about all endurance athletes. They want to pay all this money, train for months and months, and then pretend they're not doing what they're doing when they get to a race. Oh, gosh, I wish I wasn't here. Well, you probably could have solved that when you made that career choice to go out and do this running. You're there, you paid for it, you might as well do it. Same thing with walkers. You want to be able to get out there and you want to enjoy what you're doing. Well, you can still have good posture and look around and enjoy nature and stuff. You're going to be much more efficient. Quick line here about walkers. Everybody know what a speed walker is? You ever seen in the Olympics? Very strange looking thing. Speed walking, the athletes they test for speed walking produce higher scores on VO2 max, which is the measure of how much oxygen these super athletes can take in and how much their body can process. That's the difference between us and the Kenyans. They take in huge, I take that back, they probably take in a similar volume of air, probably a little higher, but their body's so much more efficient at using it. So if they take in, let's say, 86% oxygen. I'm just throwing a number out there. They utilize 60% of that, where most else will be using maybe 40 or 55. So they just have a better oxygen delivery system through genetics, number one, and through really, really great training, volumes and volumes and volumes of training to train that system. So for walkers, though, if you have to do that speed walking, we have to keep one foot on the ground. That's why you'll see people who speed walk eventually probably start to jog, because it's more efficient. Because you don't have to keep one foot on the ground. It's just a more natural flowing motion. But so speed walking, if done well, if you're going to do a more advanced, what a great workout. What's the other great advantage you're doing speed walking versus running? Lots of times. You get home faster sometimes. Well, you watch, this is one of the things we'll see is people who are speed walking well inevitably are passing runners who crash and burn on marathons. Because it's the tortoise and the hare. They've really paced their energy well. They've been efficient. They haven't wasted it. And so they end up being further ahead and getting really a better workout out of it. But the same principles apply. You want to be just looking forward, ahead, and being nice and efficient with it. So that's basically your posture. And again, you could reset this. I will do this during runs. Reach up and stretch. It's so easy. I can feel it in the neck when I'm really starting to get fatigued. And just reset underneath there. Good. You need to recognize what that feeling is. It's not just about having great posture. It's recognizing what that feeling is. Okay? Next thing we're going to talk about. So where should you land? And there's a lot of debate about this. Anybody here have running friends who've told them what the latest trends are and how you should be running? Have you ever been lectured by a running friend? Okay. Where do you think your foot should be landing? What's the one thing we've ruled out already? I think we have confidence. No heel. Okay? So where should you be landing? Anybody ever hear of the book Born to Run? Born to Run started a whole new revolution, which I think most podiatrists and orthopedics are really grateful for. Guy went, what's that? Yeah, this guy went down to New Mexico, the Tarahumara Indians, and he trained with them and found out that they run hundreds of miles, and all they wear is sandals on their feet, and they have a much more natural running form. And so he came back with this whole idea of the minimalist movement. Let's get a shoe that's that thick where you can feel the ground, and everybody should be running on their forefoot. I'm like, yeah, if I were a Tarahumara Indian, and I've been doing this for 200 years, then maybe I would do it that way. But I'm not. And so to suddenly just go to that and go out and get a really minimalist shoe and do all your training in it, it's not bad to do that to strengthen your foot, but to suddenly make that your bread and butter of exercise is a bad move, because it's not enough support and we're all different. So I'm not a big fan. You'll hear lots of people say, I run on the balls of my foot. What will happen, do you think, in a distance race to people who run on the balls of their foot after a while? Well, they get blisters probably, the driving and so on. What else? What else will happen inevitably to their form, to their foot strike? Where do you think they end up? They'll end up back on their heels. They'll just fatigue. It also puts a tremendous amount of strain on the Achilles complex, because if you hit like this and then your body weight comes down, you know that thing with it cantilevered out there is going to put it's not going to just stay put. It's going to stretch, 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 stretch. So we're looking for midfoot. So stand for me, please. So here's where you're going to feel. We're just getting a feel for what midfoot should be like. So let's roll up on our toes and roll back. Up on our toes, roll back. Back on our heels, I'm talking about. All the way back on your heels. So as you do this, just get a sense below the knee of what the muscles are doing when you go too far forward or come too far back. Where do you feel the most comfortable? Right in the center, right in the middle, right? Does that not make sense to you in that short little thing right there as to why you should be more midfoot? Good, have a seat. So here comes the next question. People say to me all the time, should I be thinking where I'm placing my feet when I'm running? And my answer is usually, I would shoot myself in the head if I had to think about every time I place my feet where they're going. Now, I want to be aware of it, but what are the techniques I can use to ensure that that happens? Another question we get is, should I be pointing my feet forward? I'm like, yes, to a degree. I have very flat feet. You can tell because we see this in the store all the time. When we ask people to stand up, our feet come out to the sides. You ever seen one of those little bird figurines that sit on the desk with the bendy legs? You know, you put the legs straight down, it falls over. You put them out to the side, and it will stand. That's what more flat-footed people do. That's how we get stability. However, there's little quirks that we have. Sometimes people will have one foot that flares out, or they'll have both feet that flare out. Should they be changing that? And I think gradually they should be doing it. That's part of that posture thing, too, is looking forward straight ahead. and trying to get your feet more straight ahead. If you know specifically that you're coming out to the side and you can feel it. Obviously, straightest line, shortest distance is going to be with your feet coming this way and not out the sides. That being said, lots of things will weigh into that, such as do you have muscle imbalances? Is it compensating for a problem in your hips? Or is it inflexibility in your upper legs? Those are things you need to look at and address. Probably a good functional, they probably do here from time to time in clinics. I know there's a couple local guys who will do, functional movement clinic. Are your hips level? Do you have strength out here? Do you have stronger muscles in there that are now making you do that? But so try and be conscious. It's a lot easier, by the way. Who are walkers again? Raise your hands. A lot easier to do in the walking. I think a great thing to do in the walking is just, and it might even be a matter of practicing. Go to a parking lot where they've got the lines painted down. Or if there's a consistent crack in the road. So some of the more efficient runners we'll see will almost be in the same spot each time they come down. They're almost right on the center line, but that's a great way to practice. And again, what are you practicing? Well, we don't want you out there all day in the Walmart parking lot. It could get dangerous after a while. What we want you to do is sensitize yourself to what right feels like or what more efficient feels like, rather than just thinking about it. Go like, all right, so I can now. So as when I was coaching my swimmers last night in the pool, I was saying you really need to know when you're doing something wrong. I have one woman, and wrong's a strong word, but I was doing a certain drill, and she went about 5 feet off from shore doing the wrong drill I'd asked for, and you could see her thinking underwater, and she immediately changed and went back. And I said, that's an athlete. That's what I need. Somebody who's actually, it's not a moral proposition as whether they're doing right. Somebody who is self-censoring. Somebody who knows when they're not doing it right and can get bad on the track. By the way, how many chances do you get to have to get it back on track? A bazillion, as many times as you want. There's no penalty for this. So again, focus on that. But again, the midfoot. So how do we make sure without thinking each and every stride that we're landing midfoot? What's a good way to get to that? How do we get that leg? Because this is really the question. How do we get that leg underneath the hip, that ideal position? So what's the formula for speed I told you about before? Stride length times cadence. Cadence is the next thing. This is critical. So I want you guys to stand up. Does anybody know about how many steps most people take in a minute when they're running, jogging, slow jogging? It would surprise you because it's going to sound crazy road runner fast to you. It is about 160 steps a minute. What do efficient runners take? Anybody got a guess? They take about 180 steps a minute. Okay? Where do you get that out of the budget? The minute's the same. Minute's locked in. That's our time thing, right? So that's our one measurement that stays constant. So what's changing when you're running from 160 to 180? What's the one thing in your form that will have to change? You'll have to take shorter strides to get them in. And this is a great way, because running is rhythm. I tell my triathletes all the time, running is rhythm, swimming is rhythm, cycling is rhythm. You can get out of it real quick, but if you want to be efficient, you stay on it. And so what you want is you want a beat that you can stick with. And let me show you, there's not a ton of space here. I'll probably be off camera for a brief second. You guys have a seat for a moment. So what we'll hear, again, for the foot strikers, we'll hear this. And when I'm running, what I really like to see is much quieter, much smaller strides. Now, people sometimes have difficulty with this. It's going to go back to that neuromuscular thing I was talking before about, why does my son text so much quicker than I do? He's practicing that a lot more. Those neural pathways have been built. He's just used to it. So one thing I want you to do is you got to get used to a rhythm. I actually run at about 200 steps a minute. Doesn't mean I'm any better than anybody else. It just means I was a sprinter, so I'm much more comfortable with putting down quick steps. And again, it's a good way for me to increase my speed without bringing a ton of fatigue to my legs when I'm in a triathlon. So let's listen to what 180 sounds like. Hummingbird insane, right? Let's break that down for you. What does that really represent? Well, let's get you to stand up. And we'll look. So in place here, taking short, tiny steps, try and get on that rhythm. Not that crazy, is it? Like I said, most people take 160. Now, 180 is supposedly around ideal. Good. Stop for a moment. I don't want to fatigue you. 180 is around ideal, but it doesn't mean that's going to be the best for everybody. There are Olympians that take 176. I take 200. They're in the Olympics. I'm not. So apparently it's not wrong what they're doing. That works for them. So it's a natural. You're going to find a natural balance, but it's a great thing to start thinking about. What's this doing much more automatically when I go to 180 versus 162? What's going on with my leg, where my leg's going to land? It's going to come much more underneath me. And what's the reason if I'm sticking on 180 that's going to come more underneath than if I'm at 160? Why is it ending up there? Just because I put on a peppier tune? Well, it doesn't have time to go out front. If you're going to do that rhythm and stay on that rhythm, you don't have time to dangle a leg out here. It's going to have to be so if I swing out here, sometimes you'll see this in the newspaper, you'll see kids who are running in high school who, are athletic but don't have that well-trained body or that great technique in running. You'll see them with their leg dangling way back there. You see it all the time in race pictures of this. And that's really cool. It looks very dramatic. Except there's only two places you can produce speed when you're running. Where are they in relation to time and space? Where's the only place your body can be when you're running? One of two places. Either on the ground or in the air. What's the only one that can produce speed? On the ground. That's where you're creating the speed. So in the air, that's impressive. That's wonderful. I'll show you one other thing that also happens with this, is when you bring this leg way out here, and then you got to wait for it to come under. You literally have to wait for it to come underneath your body before you can make that, I don't want to say ground contact, before you can pass it, your body over it. And then it comes all the way back here. Now you literally have to wait. It's only a split second. It's not like your entire life passes before you between strides, but still, it's time. It swings back here, and then it's got to swing forward all the way again before you can take your next stride. Whereas when you're going, it's right there. So let's try it again. We're going to get that rhythm up there. Good. Now, I'll tell you one thing. The difference between you guys and really, really good athletes at this moment is a good athlete knows how to turn off muscles they're not using. So I saw some wonderful work in the back. You guys went 90 degrees with your stride. What rhythm is your arm going to be when you do this? Same thing. Good. Stop for a moment. And let me ask you this. Where did you learn that? That your arms are going to go at the same rhythm as your legs? Beautiful. You guys are locked into the feeling part of it. Absolutely it does. And you can keep those hands loose. It feels good. It's a good counterbalance. The place that you learned it was in infancy when you started crawling. Because if you tried to crawl with one arm and one leg on the same side, you had a lot of bruises on the side of your face. It's very intuitive. So you guys know how to do that. That's pretty locked in. That's pretty automatic. The worst thing you can do, though, for any athlete is to get them to think about something that they already know how to do. Wait, what? I'll always see this when I have people just try. I go, so which arm goes with which leg when you're running or walking fast? Which arm goes with which leg? Opposite, opposite. Good. Now think about it and do it. So mimic for me, like, I see people do this all the time. Like, is that how you run? Really? Is that? So sometimes your brain will get in the way. The intuitive part you want to get to, the beep, 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 beep. Now, let's say I just downloaded this. It is called, just look up anything under metronome. Go to, how many people have iPhones here? Go to the App Store. It's a free app. They have like 12 of them. If you want to get fancy, download all 12 and see which metronome that you like the best. But basically, they're all the same. So what you could do is starting out, let's say that you're normally at 160, go to 165. Increase it. Don't go all crazy like automatically I'm going straight to this, or Brendan said he can do 200. I bet I can do 205. Knock yourselves out. Go for it. If you can do it, you can do it. I don't deliberately go to do that. I just notice it when I run. And I was talking about running being rhythm. When I was working with my athletes last year, we were at Green Lakes on the beach. And what I was doing, I was saying, I want you to count your steps. So I'm going to go for 15 seconds. I'm going to say go. You count one leg. And I want you to tell me what is the end of 15 seconds. What we were headed for was 22 to 23 steps in 15 seconds. And after a while, I got tired of looking at my watch, and I thought, I'm an idiot. I get a much natural way to do this is to when say stop and go. What was it? Without ever looking at my watch. I know I take 25 steps in 15 seconds. So I stopped doing the glancing so I wasn't going to run into one of those no waiting signs on the beach while I'm staring at my watch. So I go ready and go, and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 25, stop. That's my rhythm. That's where we're at. So again, when you're doing this, don't be afraid to increase it to 165 or just be aware of it. You can go to 70. You might surprise yourselves. You guys might be hit 180 like that. Again, but it's a neuromuscular skill that's going to take some time. Now, the final component that we want to talk about this is lean. Lean's a tough one because we are all in our late 20s now, and we have this tremendous ankle flexibility. So lean, I don't want you to think about so much. It's really hard to consciously think of it. But anybody here ever run downhill or walk downhill? You have a very, very good sense of what's too much lean and what's too much leaning back. Anybody here ever do the mountain goat course? Mountain goat training runs? Coming out of Upper Onondaga Park? I still haven't figured that out after 30 years of running that course. It's so steep that you're either going to be flaming out of control, winging, coming over like this, crashing and burning, or you're going to be. That's why I absolutely love these shoes I'm wearing now, Hoka's, because there's 2.5 inches of foam, and I'm like, I can't wait for Upper Onondaga this year. I'll heel it down if I want to. So let's show lean for a second. Would you come up here for a second? So with lean, where should you be leaning from when I talk about lean? Well, what will hips do? Will we not undo posture if we talk about lean from the hips? It's going to undo posture right away, right? So where should we be leaning from? Your ankles. And this is a hard one. But let's just say this. Let's give you the parameters. We don't want you going too far up in your forefoot. We definitely don't want you smashing down on your heels. But to be aware of it is a good it's a good feeling to go for. To be sensitized to the fact that you can do a tiny bit of lean. There is a Russian coach. His name's Nicholas Romanov, and he developed the pose method of running. And his idea with pose, and it's not the exact same as good form running, but it has elements that are similar. His idea with the pose method of running is that just like a lot of sports, he talks about figure skating and such, that it's just, in golf in particular, it's just a series of poses that you repeat. So, it would be almost if Tiger Woods hits that perfect shot down the middle of the fairway and go, good, just keep doing that. I can't. The crowd was yelling and the wind picked up and then those trees were there and they started to freak me out. And that's really in golf what messes you up, is you start thinking about this stuff. But otherwise it'd be simple, like, did you hit that perfect? Yeah, do that again. Do that in every tournament. Break the course record, just keep doing that. But we don't. Other things come into it. So with us, with the lean thing, we just want to be sensitized to the fact that we want to be able to repeat the same motion. And here's what I'm going to show you. When I say repeat the same motion, I want people to line up. Can we get 4 or 5 of you up front here? And we're going to, let's do it over here actually. Here's what we're going to do. Let's get us facing this way. And what I'm going to do is we're going to put our hands behind our backs, so no cheating here, okay? We're going to keep straight up and tall. And what I want you to do is I want you to lean forward until you can. Take it as far as you can. In honor of the 90-meter jump and the ski jump, come up. So think of that. Let's visualize we're way out over our skis here, okay? And again, leaning forward. Good. So here's the question. Besides not wanting to ruin your beautiful faces, what brings that leg forward? Fear? Yes? Gravity. And so Romanov's theory is there's gravity involved here. Why not use it? So you see people who are dumped back over like this, putting a leg out in front of them, they're never going to be able to take advantage of it. And it's a very, very subtle feeling, but it's there, and it's fun to play around with, especially if you get a slight downhill, is to feel like what is a natural moving forward point. So his idea with the pose method is basically that you're just repeating this thing, and his description of it is controlled falling. That's what he describes it as, controlled falling. But it's a wonderful thing to do before you go out to walk, or before you go out to run, to just sit there and play around with that center of gravity and go. Because what we really want to do is if we can't get that perfect, we want to know what bad is, or we want to know what less efficient is. You want to get a sense of that. If you feel yourself posting later in a walk or a run and you feel yourself with that heel coming forward and jamming into the ground, that you can recognize that and make some of these corrections. Thank you guys very much. It was good. And none of you cheated. You all kept your hands behind your back. But you're right, fear is pretty much what brings that leg up. So have a seat, guys, for a moment. So let's go back through. We're going to talk about the posture, the resetting, looking forward, lacing up, getting your hips stacked underneath there. And again, this is something you could certainly do during your practices and during the run and the walk, is to keep resetting. Okay? What was the second thing we talked about? Where's your feet supposed to be? Where are you landing on your foot? Center, midfoot. So you could even sensitize yourself to this before you start. Really simple. We're talking about, you guys, in 60 seconds you can get all these things in. The cadence is a huge part. If I had to pick one of the four that's going to produce the most benefit for you, obviously it's going to be to stop pounding your body. Is to start to get that cadence down, to slowly start to increase it if you need to. Download that metronome and go. It is incredibly simple once you get going how easy it is to internalize that pace and keep doing it again. You guys will know it. You know what it sounds like. It's like beep, 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 beep. And then you can go out there, because you know what? If you keep that metronome thing playing, like you walk for an hour or you run for an hour, people will not come around you. They won't. You'll have no running partners. Okay? They used to have a watch in the 1980s, a Casio, the original jogging watch, had one of those functions. And on several occasions, I got stuck next to a guy in a race with one of those on. Stop it! Can't you just count? And then the last one, again, is lean. Get a sense of, and this, again, is a hard one because we don't want to fall on our faces, but just how far to lean. It's a very, very slight lean. And again, I would almost couch it in terms of what you want to make sure is that you're not leaning backwards, that you have a sense that at least you're taking a little, play with gravity a little bit. You know, everybody's different. It depends on your flexibility in here. But again, I will always say this to my athletes. So now that we have the fundamentals down, never undo something that you already is right. So if you're playing around with lean and you find yourself coming from here and bending, you just undid the posture thing. Just undid the posture. So that's the least of them. But if you can get it, it's kind of fun to play around with. So cadence would be number one. Posture's always great to do. But cadence is the first thing you should work on. By the way, it's very, very hard to go out. If anybody here has a bicycle, you ever drop the chain on a bicycle, try to pedal? So if I drop the chain on a bicycle, and let's say we were holding so you wouldn't fall, and I asked you to pedal really, 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 really fast for 3 minutes, would you be out of breath? Yeah. Would you be producing any power? No. That's what it's going to feel like to you when you first start practicing with cadence. It's going to feel like you're asking you to walk faster or run faster. So the way you want to practice it is maybe a distance as long as this room. What you will find out is that suddenly if we did not increase this up to 180 by paying attention to it, you will find out that that interim in between has come up. In other words, what would you consider your rest interval? So, okay, so I'm out of Green Lakes, and I'm going to go from the pine tree to the pine tree, and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. And suddenly you find out that that interval in between is coming up, what we call raising the basement. If you can't get that ceiling, suddenly you're raising the basement. Maybe you're going from 160 to 165 to 170. Okay? Just trying to combine all those elements. Anybody have any questions? Is it clear? Go ahead. Excellent question. People often ask, should I breathe through my nose? Should I breathe through my mouth? This is my standard response. Air is free. Take it however you want to breathe. But I will tell you this. Lots of times we instinctively start to sync our breathing up to our cadence. I used to do this when I was bike racing. You're like, do I really need to be doing? So one thing I would do is when you're out there running, I always like to do a nice breath. When they do breath work with elite athletes, what do they focus on when they do breath work? What part of the breath? Because everybody's up well thinking like, I need oxygen. What are they really? The exhale. So I like to, when I'm out there running and going, okay, so now that I got this down, I bet most of us probably breathe at a more rapid rate than we need to. So I'd like every third or fourth breath, I will take that extended exhale, to get yourself more centered. Remember, you're integrating a lot of things. You've got a lot of balls in the air when you're doing this. The great thing is none of them are fatal. Lean doesn't get in, lean doesn't get in. But as you get better at it, you will begin to pay attention to it. I always liken this to the hot air balloon in the movies where it's starting to sink and they're all looking around saying, what are we dumping next? Throw that tension overboard. You'll get better at that as you practice it, okay? Does that make sense to you? Good. Guys, thank you very much for coming in today. Appreciate that. And again, they couldn't be cheaper to practice. You got 2 telephone poles and a free app, you're done. I am not much into stretching anymore. Afterwards, I like stretching. I do movement patterns. So I have a whole thing that I do with my runners where we're doing upper body, walking, just movement patterns. You can pretty much make it up. We have this thing where we go fore and aft like that. I like when they're running also to, because running is just, and walking is such a straight thing, they never get to work out laterally. So we will do things like grapevine coming across. We will do things like shuffles. Do things like shuffles, like bringing up so we increase the heart rate. So when they get ready to go, they actually feel like running. And it's work in the beginning, but again, I always emphasize to them, it's not calisthenics. Slow it down. Find out where your body's at that day, and go easy. Because you look at the woman next to me who's probably in her 70s, and she's a little more athletic, and she's going like, I'm like, no. I'm going like this. Why are you hammering it? So I would find any movement patterns you can do that loosen you up are far better. I'm not a belief, most people do this, that when they go to run, that's going to be their warm-up. I think it's easier to do with walking. But again, walking is easy to incorporate this stuff into. But they all want their run to be their warm-up. I'll go slow until I feel better, and then I'll pick it up. If you're already tight, I don't understand how those tight muscles get better just because you get blood flow in there. You're probably already doing damage because your body's having this rigid response to pounding. That's what's happening. But you're not going to pound anymore because you guys got good form running. Goodformrunning.com is the website. You can go and review this. Okay? All in Word. You can see Grant Robeson in a couple of videos. You can see a couple of Kenyans running with perfect form. It's scary. It looks like they're just moving the ground underneath them. They're just, and their heads are not moving at all. But it's really cool to see. Beautiful, guys. Thank you. I'll be out at the table, so if you got other questions.